I'm live now. What? I'm live now. Yeah, point that finger and everything else. Okay, as we normally do, we really want to gather the needs of our family and and update on some issues that are happening. Begin with the fact that we've been hearing from Mimi that she fell Monday and really did a poly, which is going to be code word around here for injuring your ribs. So if you did a poly, oh, really? Okay, you go tomorrow to check and see. But you're doing better with the pain and everything else. But she was medication. Oh, great. Yeah, but Mimi is just she was talking to Judy today and was just almost in tears by the time she finished conversation. But Judy called her a while ago and she's found some lidocaine or whatever. Yeah, that it rubs a topical that really is relieving some of the pain. So, yeah, a little. Okay. Someplace, but yeah, just really hurt her ribs, and of course the doctor said if they're cracked, or we can't do anything for you, So, just being able to give her something that can ameliorate the pain is really good. So, yeah, or cough. Oh, wow. But evidently for her, it's breathing, so it's up higher, it's where it's breathing, or if you have to cough or whatever. Oh my goodness, it's just really excruciating. So, we need to. Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah, I could put just a stretch band, an ace bandage or something around it that just kind of compresses it a little bit and kind of keeps it. Okay. Yeah. Oh my goodness. So you wanted to cough up a storm. Oh, Polly, you're making me hurt. You're making me hurt. Stop that. Stop that. So we concerned for Mimi, and we got a text. Gwen would be here, but she had a death with a family she's been ministering to. It was a young mother whose husband died with COVID. They had the funeral, was it yesterday? And now the mother is deceased, a young 20-something old. And so the rest of the family has went ahead and got their shots, but that doesn't do any good. I think they have a child between them, and so Gwen, this is a really difficult thing for Gwen to minister to. But so this family that goes unnamed, we do very much want to be remembering them. Talking about issues like that, we've been praying for Linda Anderson and her son Billy because he had the stent removed now from his liver. He donated half of his liver to his cousin. They were a match. And his cousin's name is Randy. I don't know if it's an Anderson or not, but Randy was his cousin. And Randy was at work, and one of the co-workers who was not vaccinated came in with COVID. Randy, obviously taking all the drugs for anti-rejection, is immunocompromised, and so they rushed him to Fort Worth Hospital and really are trying to intercept the onset of what could happen with COVID. He is not the kind of person that needs to have it, even though I think he's had his shots. It's scary. So Randy, the Andersons are very concerned about a nephew and the cousin of Billy, so it'll be their nephew. Yeah, Linda's not doing well, but doing better, Linda said, was feeling better Sunday. Yeah, she said, but it was not, COVID just was not good for her. And she's also, obviously, with cancer and taking chemo is immunocompromised, so it's really risky for her to have anything like that. So that family's, really, really difficult. Our son began to recognize he kind of like Rhonda has the heart arrhythmia, and he's able to spot it. But he was wearing a wristwatch like Judy that tells him if he's walked enough and if he's breathing enough or how long his egg is cooking. So it does everything for him. But it also told him that his heart was out of rhythm, and so he called and they brought him over. They put an EKG on him and realized that it was going on right then. So they sent him right into an emergency room situation. They put him under general anesthesia. They killed his heart and then brought it back to put it into rhythm again. Yeah. And he's driving home from this medical episode talking to his mother. and felt a little queasy because I mean coming out from general anesthesia, it must have happened hours ago. You don't come out that quickly. But anyway, he was on his way home, and evidently that's working. So we're really.
Was that a heart ablation they did?
No, this one, they just literally killed his heart. They just shocked his heart and stopped it, and then immediately triggered it again to see if it would get back in rhythm. Because he's youngish, he's 50. Yeah, but again, yeah, this was because with Rhonda, her situation, she's on pills. They've not done an ablation or anything with her, but that's going to be her next thing if they can't get this thing. Yeah, just her heart just starts racing, and so gets really very much beating up against itself, and so these are very similar kinds of issues, but very different treatment episodes that. Okay, and it stabilized it quite a bit then, Polly, but that may be Rhonda's next thing. Okay, so for what Rhonda's going through and how she's processing that, she needs our prayers. I mentioned David Scroll. He needs our prayers, but we're grateful that he was wise enough to get to the doctor. I got a text from Debbie, and she is starting to experience the same kinds of really upper respiratory kinds of stuff that she had last year that really put her flat on her back. She finished the covenant, I think, and got it. I think it's been, I didn't check my email, but I think she got it sent out and we'll be printing it. I don't know if, oh, okay, she's already printed it. Okay, so it's there. That's this week's, not covenant. Now it's called the Anchor because we're Safe Harbor Baptist Fellowship. Okay. Anyway, but Debbie asked for prayers, which is rather unusual that she would even ask for that. But so she must be really a little afraid about what's happening with her. So we do want to remember her. Mary Jo is having some kickback from her pill chemo stuff.
Off of the pill, the chemo pill for this week. She goes in on Friday, and they will evaluate whether they are going to they're going to evaluate how it's doing, whether it's having an
Okay.
effect, as well as whether or not
Yeah.
she's going to be able, whether they want her to go back on it for the following 2 weeks. Or to
Okay.
stay off it.
Yeah. Okay. So this is something for Mary Jo. Yeah, that is really something else. Gary says that Owen is being Owen and having some moments, so that's healthy. As much as it scares, and sometimes you really, oh no, what do I do here? You just walk with them and let them process whatever needs to happen. But so that ongoing grief will be there for months and months. We normally talk about a healthy grieving journey is about 2 years. That doesn't mean it's as intense. It means that finally after 2 years, oftentimes people will forget, on a birthday or anniversary, and then all of a sudden they remember and they're angry and guilty about that. But that's just a healthy sort of signposts and evidences of a healthy grieving process. But this early on, we do continue to want to remember Owen and how he's processing what he needs to do. Had a beautiful conversation with Patricia Smith. She is doing better. Alicia had come over to stay with her to help take care of her, and she has really had a episode of something, and she's going to the doctor and don't know what it is, but I think it's upper respiratory. Don't think it's COVID or anything like that, but Patricia was asking for prayers for Alicia, her daughter, who stays with her. Rosie seems to be doing as well as can be expected. My next door neighbor's doing well, had some episode kinds of things that are happening, but Harold Shockley's doing well. I'm surprised they still have his picture. He's president of IBC Bank. His picture's right here as you're driving down Everhart, but with Guzman, his co-president or something that way. But Harold's no longer there, but I think to honor him, they're leaving it up that way. But he's continuing to do physical therapy and everything else. Sandra Pratt.
She had surgery today.
Oh, okay.
And it was supposed to be a fairly...
Did you tell her about her dog being out chasing our dog yesterday?
No, I didn't.
Good. Let's keep that a secret, okay?
Let's wait till she's better.
That's right. But she's okay?
They're keeping
This is one of our neighbors. We've got 3 neighbors that really are concerned. Oh, okay.
She should be out by Friday.
Okay.
It was more difficult than they expected.
Okay. Sandra's got cancer and been dealing with that, but this was surgery, and maybe even a way of avoiding the even continuing, this may be a solution for her cancer issues. So we pray very much for that. So thank you, darling. Sandra Pratt, we need to do. Doris Silva, again, is Ida's sister. Ida they plan on being here Sunday. She was a little scared to be here this Sunday, but I'm really challenging them to be careful because she's now doing chemo, and that challenges one's immune system. But thank God I'm seeing numbers really go shallow for us. Out of the 500s, we're down in under 100 right now for 3 of the last 4 days, and so that's really hopeful. 2 of the last 3 days?
Today.
Well, but 2 days was great.
128 yesterday.
Yeah, but the day before that was 97, 79 or something. And I think the day before that was under 100. So I'm just taking a good guess, darling. Okay? But anyway, I like what that's doing. It just gives us a little bit more security and maybe allow some people to come back. We ate with Mike and Jimmy Nail, and he's at level 2 and said he's feeling a little bit better with his knee thing, but still not out of the woods, and don't know what's going to happen there. So it's just an ongoing struggle for him. Huh? Yeah, Peter right now texted me that the numbers stay where they are. He'll be back the 3rd, a week from this Sunday. So we still will not be without it. We will be without our praise leader until maybe a week from Sunday. So Dr. Moore is doing okay, but he and Kim are being very, very careful, and they've got the new grandbaby, and they spend a lot of time with them, and so they're being appropriately grandparenting. My wife will take on anybody that gets around her grandchildren that hasn't been shot, and so we just really want to be a part of that. Marilyn Milam is home and is full of vim and vigor. She called me Sunday and said her typical thing, how about them Cowboys? So she's doing well enough. Yeah, they won, so Marilyn Milam is happy. Yeah, but Houston lost. So that's a... Oh no, okay, I'm sorry. I just had to figure out who you're pulling for, so we just have to keep on worrying about that. Okay. Yes. Yes. Oh my goodness. Yes, Lorraine White. Okay, she was part of an older generation, so. Oh, spring chicken. I'm sorry, I thought she was an older lady, Joanne. Your age, huh? Lorraine White. Oh my goodness. This is an old Chapman Ranch family, and okay, just a graveside. Okay, good. So Lorraine White family and Marion's family, and Marion's doing treatment again too, so that makes it. He's got to be very precarious and very careful because he's back on. You think he's the last White? Okay. Okay. Wow, that is something else that way. But we'll pray for Marion, but also for losing his sister-in-law, and pray that things will be well there. Still praying for Vicky. Don't know why, because she doesn't do what the doctor tells her to do anyway. But, just a little bit better every day. Vicky's breathing a little bit better, a little bit freer, a little bit more endurance. Okay. Okay. And Rick is just Rick?
Yeah, he's got his problems.
Okay. Don't we all? Yes, I do. I understand that. Oh my gosh. Just praying for them like crazy, and praying that God will be with them. Do want to continue to remember George Swank, and probably will be October before they're able to get his mother cremated, and once that happens, then he and Gloria will fly out to New Jersey, and they will have a celebration of her life with his brother. They're a little concerned because his brother's one of those that just doesn't want to get vaccinated, and George doesn't, with his condition, doesn't need to be around that. So, pray that maybe by October things are really quieter and maybe more stable for that family, because you just don't want to add one thing on top of another. So, I know he's concerned about that. Trina Dixon, we pray for her, and we missed out on our chicken, King Ranch chicken this past weekend that she was cooking, and we were part of that. And Lydia Hasty has some workmates and some friends of her that are going through difficult times, and so she had asked for some prayers, and we want to do that. Remember them. Pat is maybe kind of has quasi good news, but question mark still. She is the wandering around question mark person, but still facing. And you do see the doctor, or you did see the heart doctor for your follow-up?
No, I didn't go back.
Okay.
My doctor told me the
Okay.
report,
So it's okay.
Don't
Don't go back and do that. Okay.
for him to tell me the same thing.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So now it's just a matter of waiting for scheduling? Okay. And she will leave the country when they schedule it, so that she comes back and says, okay, let's redo this again. I don't want to do it right now, so I'll get out of town that way. Yes?
My brother and his wife, last week they found out.
Yes.
They went to go have an ultrasound, and the baby heart wasn't beating.
Yes. And probably...
And it's been on them. They've been trying for so long, and it's just another.
This was one pregnancy that got as far as it did, and it now. So there's going to be a stillbirth. They probably will have to do some sort of, most women's bodies know when it's wrong and they'll spontaneously abort, but it can be very septic, and so pray for that family. That's just, and heartbreak. Oh my gosh. The mothers that I've had to deal with that could not get pregnant and tried everything in the world and losing, and oh goodness gracious, it is just a horrible grief process for them. So thanks, Ben, for reminding me about that. Any other prayer needs that maybe I've forgotten? Yes,
My
Pat.
son got a good report, negative report.
Yeah, I had a melanoma on his arm. Thought it was. It did not turn out to be melanoma. Just a typical, kind of LaFera, just a genetic code, a birthmark or something, whatever it was. So, but that's still very freeing that way. Thanks, Pat. Yes.
We could pray for you. Yes. And what you had that could be.
Yeah, I see the eye doctor Friday, so hopefully I can still see.
You're the eye doctor.
You're not. What are you thinking? I just got a sore on my back, but I think it's popped, Judy. I'm feeling wetness on my back, so we'll see. The doctor didn't want to work with it, but I'm to the place now. It was starting to hurt, and so no, he didn't want to cut it or anything. So not today, but 6 months ago. No, it's bothered my swing, Gary. I don't know how else to do that. Elizabeth Roman, we want to remember, but she's doing well, and we're very, very grateful for that. Very grateful for that. So. And then Steve Jennings has family over in Alabama, his mother and a sister and everything else that needs to be done that way. So before we do our Bible study, let's take a moment. Let me say a prayer in our behalf, and probably right in the middle of my prayer, I'm going to remember somebody that I intended to remember. God, thank you so much that you have given us hearts filled with Christ's presence that allows us to reach outside of ourselves and our own self-interest and be concerned about others. Thank you for calling us to the higher purpose of belonging to your family, being part of the body of Christ in this world that desperately needs to know the healing that we know comes through you, our great physician. God, we lift before you all of these concerns, as well as those reasons that we celebrate and give you thanks for healing that comes, and plans and hopes that we have as individuals, but as families and as a community of faith. Continue to do what only you can do for us and through us and with us. We offer you all of these needs as we offer you our hearts and minds at this moment. In the name of Christ, I pray for us all. Amen. All right, Genesis chapter 21, continuing the saga. Getting to learn a lot with you, and you just sit here and just stay bored and quiet and sleepy and everything else. As I've shared with you before, the Pentateuch, but Genesis, particularly the strong narrative part of the first five books of the Bible, is a document that probably was codified and written down during the Babylonian captivity. Until that moment, the Jewish people were classically people of their age and their time. The basic form of any kind of record keeping was on clay tablets using pointed sticks called cuneiform as a means of writing. But when they got to Babylon, they ran into a very advanced civilization in the Persians and in the Babylonians. And under Persian captivity, they learned about things like sheepskin and papyri and how to develop actually a script that for Hebrew language is based a lot on the old pointed stick in a clay, but now transferred over to sheepskin and papyri, which was a weaving together of very fine bamboo from rivers' edges in the Tigris-Euphrates River Valley, and so when they came back to Jerusalem to begin really settling it under Ezra and Nehemiah, and in that particular period, they brought back with them a new kind of profession that even in the New Testament we know as the scribes. The first scribes that we ever hear about in the New Testament are part of the resettlement under Ezra. In fact, Ezra himself is known as the scribe of Israel. And we surmise that he was sort of the president of a theological school that spent its time copying the verbal traditions that had been handed down for generation and for millennia and now had become codified. And the Jews, as they remembered their stories, scholars identify and recognize that there are very definite themes or streams of storytelling. And it's amazing how they will kind of leap out at you. I mean, you can take the story, for example, of Noah and the ark, and if you read it carefully, at one particular point, if you were a child and you sang the song about Noah, you know that into the ark he took pairs of animals, 2 by 2, right? Well, if you read further and read deeper into that sort of thing, you will run across the fact that there was one of the sources that indicated, I keep on getting a cramp when I try to get comfortable. Okay. No, it's not that word. It's just when I cross my legs that my inner thigh says, don't do that to me. Anyway, you'll run across one of the storytellers that has been sort of edited and put together and redacted or pieced together where it is 7 animals. And then you have the redaction where, well, it's 7 of the clean animals and pairs of unclean animals. And yet the truth of the matter is Noah had no idea what an unclean animal was. That didn't happen until Moses, 2,000 years later. So it's just a lot of fun to read and realize that as they told these stories over and over again to each generation, and then it becomes written down, the writers, the editors, those who pulled together the Old Testament language or the Old Testament stories, did not look at the stories like you and I look at it. We've been trained after the latter part of the 1800s with the development of historiography as actually a scholastic adventure. We look at history as linear, as the Civil War caused this, and then because of that there was the Reconstruction, and became that, and we look at history of what triggers the next event. Before humans did that at the end of the 19th century, ancient man looked at history like a kaleidoscope. They didn't worry about what came first. They saw patterns and they saw God at work in this way. And so, for example, there's a moment in the Old Testament story where Abraham's got some camels. Well, that's wonderful, except if he did a lousy job passing that on, because our first recorded instance of camels being used domestically or anything else wasn't but from the Egyptians about 1,500 years after Adam was leaving Ur of the Chaldees. So, I mean, they don't care. They did not worry about those kinds of things that are really curious for us. And so even when we're reading this particular story, we have a kind of composite of several traditions. And the two major traditions that have been identified that's so much fun for me to look at and to enjoy and I share with you is the Northern Kingdom tradition that fell 200 years before the Southern Kingdom fell, and that is called the Ephraimitic or the E tradition. The Southern Kingdom, the Judean tradition, is called the J tradition, and they tell the same stories, and we looked at that last week with very different emphases, very different patterns. In the Southern tradition's way of telling the story, God always has His name present. And I pointed that out to you that if you're dealing with the Judean or J tradition, when they are talking about God, it is always the Lord with all capital letters, capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D, when you're reading it in English. If you were reading it in the Hebrew Bible, you're reading along with these kind of funny caricatures, and all of a sudden you come to 4 consonants that have no hen scratching around it, because the vowels once the Hebrew language began to be a dying language, they began to create vowels so that you could, further generations would know how to pronounce the Hebrew words. But the vowels in Hebrew don't look like I, O, E, and U. They're like little dots or little T's or little curly things around these large consonantal pieces of the language. And so again, the Judean tradition, if you're reading the Old Testament and you're looking at one of the Southern traditions and you come across the name for God, it is the name that cannot be uttered. They don't know how to say the name. It is the Tetragrammaton. If you want to be really highfalutin, it's the 4-letter representation of the name of God that was revealed to Moses in the burning bush. Even though Adam and Eve in the second creation story actually talks about God in His name that was given to Moses, 1,000 years or 4,000 years later. It's just fun. When we're looking at the Northern tradition, which is much later and much more modern, they never refer to God by His name. It's always Elohim, which is literally plural. Elohim means gods. But that's a reference to the singular God of Israel, because the verb that accompanies this plural noun is always singular. And so textually and translatingly, you know that when you see Elohim, even though you want to translate it literally as gods, because the verb that it is associated with is singular, that's the E tradition's way of referring to the God of Israel. No name used or anything else. And we pointed out last week how that in the Northern tradition, the more modern, later tradition, God always communicates through dreams. It is one of the signals of the E tradition. If God wants to communicate His word to somebody, He's going to cause a dream to happen to that person. In the J tradition, like we saw when Abraham and Sarah, saw these 3 strangers walking down the road and makes them come in so he can give them a little bread and peanut butter, and ends up feeding them a 7-course meal. And they're sitting there talking, and finally one of these sacred beings, who turns out to be God Yahweh Himself, says to Abraham, I know that you're already on Social Security and that your wife is way past childbearing age. You're in your 90s and she's in her late 80s. I'm going to come back next year and in 9 months, and we're going to have a baby. She is going to bring you a son. Like I promised you, through your son, through you, I'm going to bless the world, and I'm going to raise up a mighty nation. And of course, that Sarah's listening in, because, like my grandmother on a party line, there is no such thing as a private conversation. And so she's listening behind the curtain to these men sitting out in front of the tent talking, and she starts giggling. And of course, what is her son's name? Giggles. That's what he gets named. Isaac is laughter. or smiles or giggles. I prefer giggles because as we'll see tonight, the different ways in which that his name referenced both the laughter of Sarah. There's even part of the J story where Abraham himself laughs when he hears that he's going to be a papa. And in today's story, we're going to see that the laughter continues. And if I were going to title my Bible study, it would be something like Laughter is Not Joy. And so with that kind of background, let's read Genesis chapter 21, and we're going to look at the first 14 verses. And I may stop as we come along, and do some cross-referencing here, but we begin it by, again, the Lord visited Sarah. Notice again that spelling is all caps, which lets you know that that is the name that God gave Moses at the burning bush. The name that we don't know how to say. Oftentimes it's translated as Jehovah or Yahweh. In English, it's just represented by the Lord in all caps. If it's capital L, small O-R-D, it is a translation of the word Adonai, Sir, Mister, and that's when it's in the E tradition. That's the way that Lord will appear. It will not be in the capital letters. Anyway, the Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did to Sarah as he had promised. Now, that seems to be a kind of, like I say, the editors way thousands of years later in Babylon are piecing together all these oral traditions, trying to sew them together. And so now, beginning in verse 2, becomes the E tradition. And again, the signal thing that will let us know that is the way that God is referred to. And Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age at the time of which God had spoken to him. Not the Lord, that the J tradition would call him, but as God had promised him, as the Lord had promised him in chapter 16. Abraham called the name of his son who was born to him, whom Sarah bore him, Isaac. Again, Isaac means he laughs or he smiles or laughter, and again, I pointed out to you that Abraham laughed when he heard, and then Sarah laughed when he heard. And if you remember the Sarah story, at the end of the meal, God calls out Sarah from behind her curtain and says to her, I heard you laughing. I didn't laugh. And of course God says, yeah, you're not lying to me, but you're still going to have a son. So just get ready for it, okay? They're going to laugh at you when you get to the Social Security office, and they're not going to want to pay for your birth, so just get ready. You're going to have to come up with some extra money. So Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, as God had commanded him. Again, circumcision is one of the laws that was given to Moses. But circumcision, as they're telling the story, must have been applied to the father of their ancestry. This is not to question the historiography or the accuracy of this story. It is to recognize that this particular brush point is something that would have been of great concern to the later generations who had become used to marking their men by circumcision and setting them apart. Now, the Jews were not the only religiously driven people that circumcised the males, and some of them circumcised the females, even as some African tribes still do. It was a kind of, in Africa, sadly, the circumcision of women is an attempt to make them, to rob them of pleasure in cohabitation, so that they have even maybe more motivation to stay faithful to their husband, even if they're one of 7 or 8 wives. It is to rob them of the special enjoyment of intimacy, and to take away from them some perhaps subliminal motivation to be involved in sexual activity that would sort of desecrate the family. But it also seems to have some religious impact too. But for the Jews, along with some other ancient primitive cultures, circumcision was a very specific marking of the child that Paul even picks up when he talks about the circumcision of the heart, where God peels away that which resists and covers our heart from His grace. And it becomes a very meaningful paradigm for how God works in our personal lives. But He circumcises Isaac on the 8th day. And again, one of the interesting things that medical technology has discovered is that it really is about the 8th day where a newborn child reaches the peak of coagulation. Its blood is sort of matured at that point, and so that circumcision is not dangerous to cause a younger child to bleed out. That it is a time where the blood of an infant really reaches its best capacity to heal and to coagulate, to be able to do that. But I'm not sure, as God told them to do that was also probably validated in terms of how they could do. This was such an important command. In fact, it's one of those rare things that could actually be done on the Sabbath. And if it was the 8th day and it happened to be the Sabbath, you could circumcise a child. It was not prohibited. It was something that was to be done on the 8th day as part of Jewish religious law. Now, how old is Abraham when he's got his new boy? He was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. He was 88 when Ishmael was born. Okay, so this 12 years later. That's going to create a problem for us, okay, in just a moment. But Ishmael, which is Hagar's son, that Sarah gave him because she thought she couldn't have children, which prompted God's visit and told her, yeah, you're going to have a kid. You're trying to preempt my initiative, but, here, and so she sent her slave woman into her husband and and said, let her bear me a child. It was a surrogate motherhood, supposedly, but as we know, Hagar wasn't, you're not getting this kid. This belongs to me. And it creates some real tension in the family, as we'll see here in just a moment. So Sarah said, God has made laughter for me. In fact, everybody who hears me tell about the story of the birth of my son are going to laugh at me. They're not going to believe it. It's hilarious. And she said, who would have said to Abraham and that Sarah would suckle children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age. Well, she ain't no spring chicken. We guess that she was probably 6 to 8 years younger than he, so she's in her 90s anyway. The child grew, was weaned, and we know that in antiquity and among Israelites that the general age of weaning was 3 years of age. So we would guess maybe it was about that time. We also, that one of their great things was that when a daddy had a son that was weaned, it was his first step towards full independent manhood, and he'd throw a party for himself. Women weren't included. But he had a great feast on that day that Isaac was weaned. But in the course of that, Sarah now sees that 3-year-old son playing with that son of Hagar the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham. He was playing with Isaac, and boy, Sarah's suspicions and hackles began to rise. They were playing like equals. I remember when I was growing up on the farm, one of my favorite playmates that was just almost like family to us was the son of our hired Hispanic, incredible. He had been a caballero in Mexico before the Depression that hit Mexico before the United States, and Juan Baltazar Rodriguez came across, and my family hired him. And he was with my family when I was born, so he was with my family for 40 or 50 years until he retired. And Juan married Romana, who was his second wife. I don't know what happened to his first wife. They were Catholic as well as they could, but if it was a divorce, I'm sure it wasn't annul, so they probably weren't in good standing. And I don't ever remember them going to church. But we took Raul, which I couldn't say, so we called him Rayon. Rayon was my age. And we'd take him to vacation Bible school with us, and he'd learn the scriptures, and we'd play football together, and we'd pick him up and take him to football, and And Rayon was just, he was just part of my life. And I shall never forget, my earliest consciousness of Rayon was that when we go down to grandmother's house, I mean, we've been outside playing and it was time for us to go get a drink of water or, an apple or something else, we'd just run in the back door and he'd run up to the back door and stop. He wouldn't come in until we asked him to come in. And he would enter very, very sheepishly. I don't know if my grandmother had said some things or that he just picked up on the vibe that somehow, as a Hispanic boy, he was not an equal and was not acceptable in her house as we were. Obviously, we were her grandchildren, so we never knew that house didn't belong to us. But one of my earliest memories was that Rayon knew his place and was very courteous and very dignified, and he was just a great, great young man. Sadly, after he graduated from high school, joined the Army. In his first year, he has finished boot camp, and he's in Oklahoma. I don't remember which Army camp he was at, but it was in the middle of winter time, and in Oklahoma they have ice on roads, and he was driving his own car and flipped and was killed at the age of 20. Which is one of the great losses in my life. But here's Sarah watching her son, Isaac, playing with Ishmael, realizing that as far as Isaac's concerned, he's playing with his brother. And that's a threat. That's a threat to Sarah. So what is her response? She says to Abraham, "You get rid of this slave woman with her son. For the son of this slave woman shall not be heir with my son Isaac." They're not going to be under this roof. They're not going to eat the same stuff, and he's not going to get what my son's going to get. She was a mother's mother. Nobody was going to get between her son and his destiny. And she had to get rid of all comers to the party. And so the thing the thing was very displeasing to Abraham on account of his son, because after growing up and growing Ishmael for 12, 13 years, Abraham's developed an affection. This is his boy. And it hurts him. But God said to Abraham, "Don't be displeased because of the lad and because of your slave woman. Whatever Sarah says to you, you do it. For through Isaac shall your descendants be named. And I will make a nation of the son of the slave woman also, because he happens to belong to you. And anything that belongs to you is going to be blessed." So Abraham rose early in the morning, took bread and a skin of water, gave it to Hagar, putting it on her shoulder, along with the child, and sent her away. Now, if you read this in the original Hebrew, that's a very obscure sentence. It sounds, and the Hebrew would support it, that Hagar is got her young boy sort of like a papoose strapped to her back, along with the water and the bread. He's probably 17 years of age at this time. So, I mean, we just don't know what to do with that. And this is one of those places where, again, the E source, the northern source, has the J source in there and knows that they're, and they don't know what to do with it. So, because next week when we come to the rest of the story, when she gets to the place and she's out in the wilderness and they've run out of water and food and everything else, she's going to die. And so she puts her son underneath a broomweed and walks off a long distance and sits down and starts crying as she's looking back at her child, who's crying also. And it's almost the image of a little child, little 1-year-old or something. But that doesn't fit chronologically. But again, see, those are things that 21st century people ask, but not to the original storytellers. What they tell the story to emphasize and exaggerate is how much our bad decisions and our anger and our resistance and our desire to run the world never stops God from accomplishing His purpose. She departed, and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba, which is down south of current-day Palestine, around the Negev, which is the desert of the Arabian Peninsula. Just a couple of concluding things, and I've done a lot of talking tonight, which you know that I got diarrhea of the gums, so you're just going to get the full done of it. There's lots of laughing that's going on in this story from chapter 13 all the way through this chapter. Lots of laughing from lots of quadrants, from Sarah, from Abraham, from all the friends of the family that don't believe Sarah, that she's lying, that she probably stole that child out of somebody else's nursery, but they just can't believe. Can you imagine the poor officers in the Social Security and Medicare agencies trying to figure out how to justify paying this kind of stuff? I mean, they just, he's just source of laughter. But I would observe to you that no matter how much laughing is going on, that it's not the source of joy. The title of this Bible study for me is Laughter is Not Joy. In fact, oftentimes laughter masks an incredible anger. I have to be careful because sometimes my teasing and my sarcasm is really a form of anger. And it's unhealthy. And when I give in to that, I have to go to confession and talk to God about the fact, I apologize. I really wasn't interested in that person that I was teasing. I was interested in really getting even or getting my voice heard, and so I have to be very careful of that because it's raising a family of boys, we didn't know how to say I love you. What we did know how to do is to tease each other and call each other names. And yet I remember moments where somebody would go after one of my brothers and I'd lay down my life for him and then turn right around and call him a name. It's my way of really somehow saying that, I love you. And it was a improper and an immature way of saying I love you. But when we talk about laughter is not synonymous with joy, as Christians we know that joy finds its source in a deep, faith-filled relationship with God through Jesus Christ that provides dignity and worth and purpose and inclusiveness and belonging. In spite of the fact that our world gets upside down and we find ourselves angry and we find ourselves maybe laughing, in particular, again for me, this is confession time, I apologize, but probably the most self-revealing moments to myself that nobody else ever sees, but I'm keenly aware of, about a weakness in my own character, is when I'm around a bunch of guys, and oftentimes it's at the golf course, and I will hear somebody crack a joke that is off color, that is racial, that is filled with values that do not represent my Christ and my heart to Him, and I find myself laughing with them. Now, I will tell you that the older I've gotten, the less often I do that. Oftentimes I will have a smile on my face and I will say something to my friend that's just told me this ridiculous joke, cut it out. That's unworthy of you or something, and without preaching at them. But family, I'll tell you, it's been a long time. If I'm past 39 right now, that growing up and realizing that, boy, there has been a very dark side of my heart that refused to take ownership for inappropriate values and inappropriate expressions that was designed to create laughter, that I participated in to my chagrin. And oddly enough, in those moments where I found myself laughing with that nasty joke, I could not locate joy in my heart. When I'm able to stand up without being cruel, but to refuse to participate in that laughter, there's something inside of me that feels like joy. Like I don't need them to approve me. I know to whom I belong, and I know who belongs to me. And I can be faithful to that relationship in Jesus Christ, and maybe even do it in a way that will invite my friend to a greater dignity, to a greater sense of human value and Christian value? Laughter is not joy. And Isaac is one of the proof tales, because we're not very far from Abraham being instructed by God to take and kill Isaac. That house was not filled with joy or laughter when that occurs, until God steps in and Abraham discovers something about his heavenly Father that he probably could not have learned any other way. We don't know. We will not be the judge of that. We will simply look over his shoulder and say, God, teach us. Teach us how we destroy children that we should claim and own. And it's a tough time, especially because we're able to see what's happening in Del Rio and what's happening in, in Africa, and what's happening in the ghettos, and the hunger of children. And oh my goodness, how we color our hearts and stop to see and embrace God's calling to us to be the conscience and the hope of a world that without Jesus Christ doesn't have a leg to stand on. We can join our father Abraham in saying, I've got reason to laugh, but I've even got more reason to hope that through my life and through my children, the world's going to be blessed. Jesus can say that about you. And if you don't think you're a blessing, you're going to have to look at this old squirrely face, and you're going to have to hear me say, every last cotton-picking one of you is a blessing to me. I wouldn't be the same. I wouldn't be as rich as I am if it weren't for you and your friendship and your faith. Thank God for what you bring to me and to this community. Okay, I will close with prayer and send you on your way and to your continuing assignments in honoring Christ by the way you live and the way you laugh and the way you find joy. Oh God, go with these friends of mine, these children of yours. Go with us into this world, helping us know that we have more power because of your Holy Spirit living with us and in us and through us. Grant us a freedom and a dignity, not to have to be badgering or brutal, but to be tenderly truth-tellers, tenderly caring for people and inviting them into the place of a relationship with you that can help them find the joy that we have found because of your love and forgiveness and redemption of us. Bless these richly this week. In the name of Christ, I pray for them. Amen. Blessings on you. Thank you so much. And I went a long time tonight. You'll get it back next week, okay?